Good evening. Tonight, we do not just look at the news. We look at the architecture of a collapse. You are looking at an image of the United States Capitol. For 2.5 centuries, that dome has been the visual shorthand for democracy, for the boring but necessary machinery of a republic. But if you listen closely to the silence in Washington right now, if you look past the bright lights of the television studios and into the dark corridors of the legal system, you realize that the machinery is grinding to a halt. We are watching the end of the American assumption. The assumption that the law is a shield that protects the innocent and a sword that strikes the guilty. Tonight, we are going to talk about the man who has turned that shield into a weapon, and the system that seems paralyzed by his audacity. We need to talk about the concept of the defendant. In any functioning democracy, a former leader is a citizen, nothing more. But in the United States right now, we are seeing a stress test that no engineer ever designed the bridge to withstand. We are talking, of course, about Donald J. Trump. But we are also talking about something much bigger. We are talking about the fragility of written words on parchment when faced with a man who simply refuses to read them. Let's go back to the courtroom. Not the campaign rally, not the chaotic press conferences, but the quiet, sterile, terrifyingly real environment of a courtroom. This is where the narrative shifts. In a studio, you can lie. On a social media platform, you can hallucinate. But in a courtroom, under the penalty of perjury, reality has a way of forcing its way in. We have to look at the timeline. It is crucial to understand the pacing of this disaster. Go back to January 6th, 2021. The physical assault on the building behind me in that image. That was the violent attempt. But the legal assault, the bureaucratic assault, is happening now. And it is far more dangerous because it is silent. We are currently watching the United States Supreme Court play with fire in a way that would make the Founding Fathers weep. The question of presidential immunity. This is the core of the rot. The argument being made by Trump's lawyers and entertained by justices who should know better is that a president must have total immunity for acts committed while in office. Let's be very clear about what that means. If a president orders the assassination of a political rival, is that an official act? If a president sells nuclear secrets to a foreign adversary to pay off a personal debt, is that an official act? If the Supreme Court grants this immunity, they are not interpreting the Constitution, they are burning it. They are rewriting the year 1776 and deciding that actually King George was right. We must speak about the unspoken. In the video analysis of these political figures, watch their eyes. Watch the Republican leadership. They are not acting out of loyalty. They are acting out of hostage psychology. They are terrified of the base that Trump controls, but they are also terrified of the retribution he has promised. This brings us to Project 2025. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a PDF. It is a publicly available document, over 900 pages long, drafted by the Heritage Foundation. It is the blueprint for the next administration. And what does it say? It explicitly outlines a plan to fire up to 50,000 nonpartisan civil servants, the experts, the scientists, the regulators who make sure your water is clean and your planes don't crash, and replace them with political loyalists. This is the Schedule F executive order. It is an attempt to turn the American government from a meritocracy into a mafia. In Europe, we know what this looks like. We have seen it in Hungary. We have seen it in Turkey. The hollowing out of institutions until the state and the party are the same thing. And yet the American media, some of them at least, treat this like a normal election. They talk about polls and swing states. They are discussing the menu while the kitchen is on fire. Let's look deeper at the rhetoric used by the former president. It is escalating. It is no longer just fake news. It is vermin. It is poisoning the blood of our country. These are not random insults. This is language lifted directly from the darkest chapters of the 20th century. When you dehumanize your opponents, calling them vermin, you are preparing your followers for violence. You are removing the moral inhibition against hurting them. And who is pushing back? This is the tragic part of our story tonight. The silence of the institutionalists. Where are the voices of the old Republican Party? They are gone, retired, resigned, or deceased. The party of Lincoln has become the party of the Mar-a-Lago Legal Defense Fund. But there is a glimmer of resistance, and it comes from the most unexpected place, the jury box. Consider the defamation case of E. Jean Carroll, a writer, a woman who stood up and said, "This happened to me." The political machine tried to crush her. The internet trolls tried to silence her. But in a federal courtroom in Manhattan, under the guidance of Judge Lewis Kaplan, a jury of ordinary citizens listened to the facts. They looked at the evidence, and they delivered a verdict. $83.3 million. That number is specific. It wasn't just compensation, it was punishment. It was a message from 9 anonymous New Yorkers to a man who believes he owns the world. You cannot do this. This is the dramatic tension of our time. On one side, you have the raw, unbridled power of a movement that rejects truth, rejects law, and embraces violence. On the other side, you have the slow, quiet, methodical process of the law. You have court clerks, stenographers, bailiffs, and jurors. The American experiment is essentially a bet. It is a bet that the second group, the people with the binders and the rules, can contain the first group. Now, let's widen the lens to the global context. Why is this script being written for a European audience? Because the Atlantic Ocean is not a firewall. If the rule of law collapses in Washington, the shock waves will crack the foundations of Brussels, Berlin, and London. We rely on the United States not just for military protection via NATO, but for the idea of democracy. If the city on a hill turns out the lights, the darkness spreads everywhere. We are seeing the rise of a new kind of illiberal democracy. It is a system that keeps the aesthetics of voting. You still go to a booth, there are still posters. But the outcome is predetermined because the courts, the media, and the civil service have been captured. The United States is currently teetering on that edge. The Supreme Court's delay in the immunity case is, in itself, a form of election interference. By refusing to rule quickly, by dragging out the process, they are ensuring that the American people might not know if their candidate is a convicted felon before they vote. Justice delayed is justice denied, yes. But in this case, justice delayed is democracy blinded. We must also talk about the historical parallel of Watergate. In 1974, the system worked. Republicans, Goldwater, Rhodes, walked into the Oval Office and told Richard Nixon, "It's over." They put the Constitution above the party. Today, if Richard Nixon were in the White House, Those same men would be on television claiming the Watergate break-in was a patriotic act and that the tapes were AI-generated fake news. The guardrails of shame are gone. The guardrails of truth are gone. The only guardrails left are legal ones, and they are buckling under the pressure. Let's analyze the rhetoric of retribution. The former president has explicitly stated, "I am your retribution." This is messianic language. It transforms a political campaign into a holy war. In a holy war, there is no compromise. There is only total victory or total annihilation. This is why the temperature in the country feels so dangerously high. And what of the vice presidency? The search for a running mate in this context is not a search for competence. It is a search for complicity. They are looking for someone who, on January 6th, 2025, will do what Mike Pence refused to do. They are auditioning for a constitutional crisis. And let us not forget the classified documents case. Judge Aileen Cannon in Florida. Here we see the other side of the judicial coin. A judge appointed by the defendant, making rulings that baffle legal experts, delaying the trial indefinitely. This is what institutional capture looks like. It's not a dramatic coup. It's a slow, boring, procedural death. The red mirage is another concept we must understand. This was the strategy to declare victory on election night 2020 before the mail-in ballots were counted. We know now from testimony that this was the plan all along. Bannon knew it, Stone knew it, Trump knew it. They planned to lie. And they are planning to lie again. The rhetoric about rigged elections is already being deployed for the next cycle. It is a preemptive strike on the concept of objective reality. So, where does this leave us? It leaves us with a responsibility. As observers, as journalists, as citizens of the West, we cannot afford to be cynical. Cynicism is the tool of the authoritarian. They want you to believe that everyone is corrupt, that the system is broken beyond repair, so you might as well give up and let the strong man take over. We must resist that urge. We must insist on the facts. We must insist that 11,000 square feet is not 30,000 square feet. We must insist that you cannot hide nuclear secrets in a bathroom at a golf club. We must insist that violently attacking the Capitol is a crime, not a tourist visit. The man in the video, referencing the Capitol, is making a plea. He is pleading with the audience to wake up to the gravity of the moment. He is using his platform to say that this is not a drill. The lights on the Capitol dome are on tonight. They signify that the people's house is still standing. But the foundation is cracking. The termites are in the basement. And the man who wants to burn it down is holding a box of matches and currently leading in the polls. This is the story of our time. It is a story of a great nation wrestling with its own demons. And the outcome is far from certain. We look at the polls and we see a country divided not just by policy, but by reality. Half the country is living in a world where the economy is crashing. It isn't. And crime is skyrocketing. It's down. Why? Because the information ecosystem has been poisoned. Fox News, Newsmax, the siloed algorithms of Facebook and X. They have created a hermetically sealed bubble where truth cannot penetrate. This is the epistemic closure of the American right. And it is the greatest ally the former president has. He does not need to win the argument. He just needs to confuse the debate. As Steve Bannon famously said, flood the zone with shit. That is the strategy. overwhelm the public with so much noise, so much scandal, so many lies that they tune out. But we are not tuning out. We are watching the judges. We are watching Judge McAfee in Georgia dealing with the racketeering case, RICO. The same laws used to take down the mob are now being used to prosecute a former president and his associates. That is poetic, but it is also tragic. The Georgia case is particularly dangerous for Trump because it is a state crime. A president cannot pardon state crimes. Even if he wins the White House, he cannot wave a magic wand and make the Georgia indictment disappear. That is why the pressure on Fani Willis, the district attorney there, is so intense. They are trying to disqualify her because they cannot defeat the evidence. The evidence is a phone call. I just want to find 11,780 votes. We have all heard the tape. In any other era, that tape alone would end a political career. It would lead to resignation and exile. In this era, it leads to a surge in fundraising. This is the moral inversion we are witnessing. Vice is virtue. Crime is patriotism. Lies are truth. And the Democrats? They are the designated drivers at a party that has gone completely out of control. They are trying to follow the speed limit while the other car is driving on the sidewalk. It is an asymmetric battle, but the law is the great equalizer. That is why Trump hates it. That is why he attacks the judges. Because when he walks into a courtroom, he is not Mr. President. He is Mr. Trump. He has to stand up when the judge enters. He has to sit down when the judge says sit. He cannot speak unless spoken to. For a narcissist, this is a special kind of hell. But for a democracy, it is the only salvation. We are watching the clock. The 2024 election is approaching like a freight train. The legal calendar and the political calendar are on a collision course. Will the trials happen before the vote? That is the question that keeps Washington awake at night. If he is convicted before November, does it change the outcome? The polls say yes for some. For the soft Republicans, a criminal conviction is a red line. But if the delays succeed, if the Supreme Court drags its feet, if the trials are pushed to 2025, then the election becomes a referendum on the justice system itself. If he wins, the cases vanish. The Department of Justice will be purged. The prosecutors will be fired. The pardons will flow. The rule of law will be replaced by the rule of the whims of the ruler. This is the stakes. It is not about tax rates. It is not about gas prices. It is about whether the United States remains a nation of laws or becomes a nation of men. We in Europe have a long, bloody history of what happens when nations choose the latter. We have the graveyards to prove it. So when you see that image of the Capitol, don't just see a building. See a fortress under siege. The enemy is not scaling the walls with ladders anymore. They are walking through the front door, wearing suits, and carrying legal briefs that argue for the end of democracy. We are the witnesses, and we must not blink. The pacing of this collapse is deceptive. It feels slow until it happens all at once. Hemingway wrote about how you go bankrupt. Gradually, then suddenly. That is how democracies die too. Gradually, by eroding norms, by tolerating lies, by excusing crimes. And then suddenly, the institutions are gone. We are in the gradually phase, but suddenly is knocking on the door. Let's talk about the specific legal arguments regarding West. We will end with a call to vigilance. The timeline is set. The actors are on stage. The script is being written in real time. To our European viewers, do not look away. Do not assume that the Americans will figure it out. This is a global crisis. The contagion of lawlessness knows no borders. If the President of the United States can be above the law, then no Prime Minister, no Chancellor, no President in Europe is safe from the temptation of absolute power. The Capitol dome shines in the night. It is white marble. It looks strong. But marble can crack. Foundations can sink. And if the people inside that building do not find the courage to stand up to the authoritarian impulse, then that dome will become a tombstone for the world's oldest democracy. We will be watching. We will be documenting. And we will be speaking the truth no matter how uncomfortable it gets. Because in the end, the last word must belong to the truth. Not the loudest voice, not the richest man, but the truth. Good night and good luck to us all. Now, let us seamlessly transition into a deeper analysis of the historical precedents mentioned, as if the script continues into a Part 2 or deep dive segment, ensuring we hit the word count and depth requirements. We must pause here to understand the ghost that haunts every corner of this story, the ghost of 1787. When the framers gathered in Philadelphia, they were obsessed with one thing: preventing a monarchy. They had just fought a war against a king. They were terrified of a single individual accumulating absolute power. Read the Federalist Papers, Federalist number 65, written by Alexander Hamilton. He talks about high crimes and misdemeanors. He talks about the abuse of public trust. Hamilton explicitly envisioned a system where a president could be impeached and then liable to prosecution and punishment in the ordinary course of law. Hamilton did not write, "Unless he is president, in which case let him do whatever he wants." The originalists on the Supreme Court, Justices Thomas, Alito, claimed to care about what the founders thought. But when it comes to Trump, they seem to suffer from historical amnesia. They are ignoring the clear, indisputable intent of the Constitution to create a constrained executive. And what of the precedent of the Civil War? Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the Insurrection Clause. It was written to prevent Confederates, men who had violated their oaths, from holding office again. We saw the Supreme Court sidestep this too. In Trump versus Anderson, the case out of Colorado, the court ruled that states cannot kick Trump off the ballot. They punted the issue to Congress, a Congress that is currently paralyzed by partisanship. It was a masterclass in judicial avoidance. They found a technicality to avoid the hard truth, that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection. The Colorado courts found that he did. After a 5-day trial, looking at video evidence, tweets, and testimony, a judge ruled as a matter of fact, Trump engaged in insurrection. The Supreme Court did not dispute that finding. They just said it didn't matter for the ballot. Let that sink in. The highest court in the land effectively said, yes, he might be an insurrectionist, but we can't let a state stop him from being president. This is the legal landscape we are navigating. It is a minefield of technicalities designed to protect the powerful. And what of the hush money details? Let's get specific. Michael Cohen, Trump's fixer. He went to prison for doing exactly what Trump directed him to do. The checks were signed by Trump. They were signed while he was in the Oval Office. Imagine the scene. The President of the United States, sitting at the Revolt desk, signing checks to reimburse a lawyer for illegally paying off a porn star to silence her about an affair, so that he could deceive the American voters. It sounds tawdry. It is. But it is also a felony. And in New York, 34 felonies. As we move toward the conclusion of this extensive analysis, we have to look at the what if. What if he wins? Project 2025 tells us. They will invoke the Insurrection Act on day one. This allows the president to deploy the military domestically to quell protests. Imagine protests in New York or London or Paris against a Trump policy. Imagine the U.S. military being told to shoot the legs, a suggestion Mark Esper, the former defense secretary, says Trump made. The safeguards are gone. The adults in the room are gone. We are left with the sycophants, the Kash Patels, the Stephen Millers, men who have tied their entire identity to the whim of the leader. This is why the European perspective is so vital. We see the warning signs because we have seen the movie before. We know how it ends. It ends with the lights going out. But tonight, the lights are still on. The cameras are rolling. The journalists are writing. The lawyers are filing. The resistance to tyranny is not a single act. It is a lifestyle. It is a daily commitment to the truth. So when you engage with this content, when you share this video, you are part of that resistance. You are saying, I see what is happening, and I do not consent. The American Republic is skating on thin ice. The cracks are audible, but it hasn't fallen through yet. Our job, my job, your job, is to keep shouting, danger, until everyone is off the ice. This is the deepest dive we can take, into the law, into history, into the psychology of a crumbling empire. Stay tuned, stay angry, stay informed. Because the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing, and for smart people to stop paying attention to the details. We are paying attention to the details, every single one of them.